Okay. To begin, can you go ahead and tell the camera your name and where you're from?
Okay, my name is Rebekah Henderson, and I live in Denver, Colorado.
Perfect, thank you. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it is that you do and what your job and career kind of is?
So I'm an ex-librarian. I worked as a law librarian and a public librarian, kind of on and off since 2011. And more recently, in the past 4 years or so, I've started working on my own individual projects. One is a podcast where we talk about race and identity. It's called Off Color. The other is a film called All Mixed Up, Our Changing Racial Identities, which is a conversation starter to talk about mixed race identity in America, specifically. And then as a result of like creating those projects and just sort of following my dreams, I started on this journey now of being a documentary film producer. The project I'm working on right now is called Running with My Girls. It's a political documentary following 5 women as they ran for municipal elections. And yeah, so that's kind of what I do. I like to describe myself as a shit talker. Like, that's what I say, because I don't do that much. But I like to call attention to things that are important to me, that I think are important and should be important to other people. So I sort of work on this. I like to engage people in conversations, like face-to-face conversations. Obviously now with the coronavirus, that has made me feel a little bit lost, because I think the difficulty in having these conversations is that they're happening online so much and they're happening behind the screen. So I would like for people to meet face to face more, because I think you'll have a better outcome. Hopefully. Yeah, and then I just hang out at my house trying to homeschool my kid. He's gonna be 5, so it's not going that well, but what can you do? Okay, carry on.
Where did those passions come from? You talked about being a filmmaker and kind of doing a podcast. Where did those passions come from, and where did that shift from being like a librarian towards being a filmmaker kind of come from?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because I've always sort of enjoyed, I was like a hobbyist, I like to make videos. I like to, I would edit them in like Windows Movie Maker. I had a lot of big ideas that I thought would be cool. I also went to college. My undergraduate degree is in theater as an actress, and I did a lot of, plays and things like that. So I've always been interested in like the entertainment field and the arts. Working at the library, what really got me started on this was a person came into the library to film a friend who was doing a program for me at the library. And when I saw all of her very fancy gear, I was like, ooh, girl, maybe we could work on something for the library. And she said, sure. And we ended up making my first film, which is called What Makes a Mother. And it's just interviews with all these moms from the Denver area. And like when I made that, and when she told me like, you're a producer now, and I was like, I am. Like, that was I liked it. I was like, oh, I was like, this is how you make a film? Cool. And that's how I moved on to my next project. So it just it kind of happened. I've always been very social justice minded. All of my work has been in that field, in education, nonprofit world. And then becoming a librarian was sort of a natural transition for me, just because it was a better fit than like the classroom for me. So and I also see libraries as very radical, because part of what a public library's mission is to bring information to the people, right? And having a well-educated electorate is how you have a functioning democracy. So I just saw my librarian work as like an extension sort of my own activism or whatever. And then having my son was sort of the impetus for the All Mixed Up film, because my husband and I are both mixed race. He's mixed Jamaican and Jewish and Scandinavian. It's like kind of wild, right? That I found him in Denver. I'm from New York. And when we when I was pregnant with my son, I know how genetics works, right? Sort of. But basically it's like usually the dominant genes, brown, you think it's like, oh, so I was just thinking, oh, he'll have like brown hair and he'll be like a little bit tan like his mama, you know, and all of these things. That child was born with red hair and blue eyes. And I did not, I was like, whose baby is this? And I took so much criticism for it. Um, but I think it was the truth, and a lot of people don't talk about it, and it was strange to me that I have this like white presenting child, and I I started to really think of race, you know, so that was, and the reason I started making the film because I made a comment, like a random comment on Facebook, and this woman messaged me privately, and because I made a joke where I said I call my son when he was a baby, I would call him bro. I'm like, I call him bro because he turned out so white. Like it's like just like a little, it's inappropriate, but it's the way it is. If you have any multiracial family members, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that realizing that I wasn't the only person, and it's kind of like, it's like mental illness, right? It's like things that are more common than people realize, you know? And so I felt like then once I started talking about it, I started hearing more people. And it wasn't just about like, oh, my baby came out white or this. It was more about people having biological children that don't look like them, and kind of the impact of that. So I have a friend who's Black from the islands, and her son is very fair. Her husband is white, and she's like, people don't think that that's her child. You know, people think that my son, that I'm the nanny. You know, and it's like there's nothing wrong with being a nanny, but I'm like, this guy ruined my body, so I would like to claim him. And I think that then when you start digging into it, it's like, well, what is that about? And then it always comes back to this ideology of white supremacy. So that was sort of that. I'm very passionate, in a long way to answer it. I'm very passionate about dismantling systems of oppression. And I feel very strongly that everybody needs to work in their own lane. I'm not saying you can't be interested in something else, but like I focus a lot on dismantling it through understanding race, and the history of racism, and what anti-Blackness really is, and how prevalent it is.
How has your identity being mixed race growing up impacted who you are today and your understanding of the world?
So being mixed in America can be a heavy lift. I'm not gonna like cry about it or anything. That's not what I mean. But particularly, I focus on being mixed with Black because of the anti-Blackness in the country, in the worldwide, really. I think that it impacted me in positive and negative ways. Someone had asked me, you know, like when a lot of people right now are waking up, so to speak, right? But I feel like I was born kind of awake, not understanding everything, but like when you have a Black parent and a white parent, like, and you know, and I grew up in an all white suburb, I was always reminded that I was other, that I was not white. And so people will often be like, well, you're half white. And I'm like, that's white supremacy talking, like, you know. And then the other side of that is the one drop rule, which is you know, all of it is terrible. So when you start to like, you know, unpack that. But for me, I think it was more because people asked me every day what my race was, what my nationality was from, where I was from, like every day, you know, unless I was with people that I already knew. That has carried on my whole life, that othering like feeling. So I think there's also a part of me that feels in some ways, you know, like, oh, I don't fit in. And I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm not Black enough for the Black kids, I'm not white enough for the white kids. That's a very common like feeling. And I'm sure there's some of that, but I've always been pretty like secure in my Black identity. And as I've gotten older and lighter, I hate to say it, that's also part of it, is the colorism. And it's because when you are a half Black child growing up in the 80s, nobody's putting sunscreen on you. Okay, like that was not a thing. So like when I had a darker complexion, and I found a lot of people who were mixed race now then or are, oh my god, but who, you know, they have the same kind of experience where they're all like darker as children, and then we're like kind of wedded to that other identity, and then as you get older your skin is lighter sometimes for some people, or you're not in the sun, or you're taking different kind of care of it, and it's a different, you know, like you look different. And so for me that was kind of interesting. My hair has changed, like from having a baby. My hair used to be like whoosh, you know. It's just that I know that America is a racist country from the start. It was born like this, and it is still like that. It grew up, it was a racist baby, and it grew up into a racist teenager, what it is now, and it's entering its final phase or something. But yeah, so I think like knowing that, I had a different understanding of what racism is. And that, I mean, even that is sort of just like bigotry, right? Like I don't think I had a real understanding of like systemic racism until probably like middle school. Then I started to really pick up on it, and I was like, oh, my history book's full of lies. Like, why do these white, anyway, okay, so yeah.
How has kind of your understanding of the world impacted the process behind creating the films and your podcast? And can you kind of go into like what it's like creating those films that you create?
Mm-hmm. Some of my filmmaking partners would say to me, stop saying you don't know what you're doing, because I always say that. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I am the kind of person that I'll try anything. Like I'm like, and I do things before they're ready. I put out like the podcast is a good example of that too. Like I didn't, you know, a lot of people say they want to do stuff, think they're going to do it, and they don't do it, right? So like I'll just do it even if it's not ready. Which I think is a talent. Well, not a talent. It's just kind of a gift as a person. So I think like that for me is something that I think is sort of admirable for people curious about it, is because like I'm like, just don't wait, just do it. You know, you can produce your own content when you don't see it. So All Mixed Up film, there's a lot of things that kind of came into play, but the real reason I started making it was a friend of mine, he was actually the co-host of my original podcast, Dr. Gregory Diggs. He passed away in 2018, but I saw this movie, it was a documentary, and it was about mixed race people, and I got excited because I hadn't seen that, and I was like, oh, I want to watch this, you know? And I watched it, and it was this bizarre, like right-wing Republican, like propaganda film. Like it was so, anyway, it like freaked me out. And so I asked my friend, the late great Dr. Gregory Diggs, I was like, oh, have you seen this or heard of this? And he watched it, and he was like, I know what this is. And he kind of explained it to me, how they, you know, the right will produce things like this. And I was like, fine, I'm going to make my own documentary about mixed race people. What? You know what I mean? And then I did, and it wasn't even, and so it was like, making that was a really big learning experience for me also. And so that film, I think, has gotten me to the point now, as I'm making this my first feature, is now I really understand what it takes to make an interesting documentary, right? Because I think All Mixed Up is valuable. It's a valuable teaching tool, but it's not, I don't know how compelling it is. It's not like a story. It's not a traditional documentary. I always say that. It's just a conversation starter. But Running with My Girls, I was so embedded in these campaigns, and I was following these women. And I think it's just because I have a curious mind, and I get excited when I learn something. And if I learn it, then I'm like, oh, I want everybody to learn it, which is, and I'm not afraid to look silly, like I don't know something, you know, like, and I'll say it, I'll feel like I was embarrassed. Like I tell a story, when I was first started making Running with My Girls, I was at a meeting at Dr. Lisa Calderon's house with a lot of people who were getting ready to kind of announce and plan the campaign. And I was like, guys, we gotta hurry up. I'm like, it's like August. And then everyone was like, the election is in May, Rebekah. I was like, oh. So I didn't even know when the elections were, and I'm making a documentary about municipal elections. And I'm not, but guess what? Do you know how many people had no idea there's an election in May in Denver? And it's actually kind of a form of like voter suppression in some ways, I think, because if you have it in November, when people are used to voting, you know, like in presidential elections or, you know, the national elections, then like, because Aurora does theirs in November also. And so like, I think that that is something to consider, because it's like, how, oh my gosh, like, how did I not know? And then I found out how important all of these positions were, the city council, the mayor, like all those things, the deep impact. So like, I am really involved in that because I had no idea how any of it worked, and I want other people to know how it works.
In terms of kind of creating your projects, what challenges do you tend to run into?
Money, 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 money. Money is the biggest challenge. I think because, yeah, most of my stuff is like self-funded and crowdfunded. And that is the hard part, because for the kind of quality of work that I want to produce, I need to hire professional people to produce the work. So that I think has been really challenging. Also having like work-life balance. Being a mother makes it really hard, and I don't want people to, like, not everyone has the same experience, but for me that has been really challenging, because you can't, you know, women are like, you can have it all, you can't have it all, you can't. It's impossible, not the way our society is set up. So yeah, trying to make sure that I'm like being a good mom and also being a good citizen and being able to like fill up my cup so that I can fill up his cup, you know? So I think like that has been really challenging. And I don't think it's something people talk about that much, really. I mean, or we don't dive deep into it. What is the impact of being a woman and a creator and a mother? And most people are not that interested in hearing about that. You know, they're like, well, you chose to have kids, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, because everyone like sold us on it like it was the best thing in the world. No offense, I know you're young, but it's like, it's fine, you know, I love my kid, blah, 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 like all that. But it's just, I wish people would be a little more honest about the parenting experience, their parenting experiences, because I think if they were, people would at least know what to expect. I didn't have a realistic expectation of motherhood. I thought it was going to be like real cute. It's hard. Okay, carry on.
What do you do to try to balance your work and life?
That's the thing, is like, I think these interviews are hard, honey, because it's like before the pandemic, I had it like set up, like it was great, you know? And so like I booked a professional studio, like, so I could record, you know, I had it so that the studio is right by my kids' daycare. So I was able to, you know, really that, I mean, it was going great. Okay. So now, there's no balance. Because like, even to do this interview now, I have to like neglect my kid, you know, he's like on the computer while I'm doing this. And I can never really be fully present, it feels like, in a lot of situations, because I'm always feeling like guilty or worried about something, you know, that's going on.
What is your favorite part about creating films and doing podcasts?
I love creating films and podcasts independently, because I get to have like full creative control. A Black woman, mixed woman, like, it's really, we're often you know, put into these boxes, and I feel like we're very centered and very silenced. And so I just like being able to express my opinions and do what I want to do without worrying like, oh, I'm gonna get fired. I'm like, fired from what? It's my own company. So I think like that that part, I like to have like it's freedom of expression, you know, really. Like, I want to be able to say what I have to say, and my message isn't going to resonate with everyone, and it doesn't need to, you know. So for me, like, kind of getting it out is feels really good for me. And yeah, I think that's most of it. And then also too, I've had several experiences from over my lifetime where people have reached out to me years later for something that I said that I don't even remember saying, you know, and they'll be like, that changed my life. And I'm like, oh, they're like, you got me on this journey. I'm like, I did. Good. All right. Could you remind me what it was? And then it's always something crazy. You never know what you're going to say to someone, you know, like in 40 years, young miss, you might be like, and I didn't have children because I interviewed this crazy lady one time and she said, don't do it. And then that's why I didn't. And now I'm a bajillionaire. Okay, just kidding.
You talked a little bit about how you had studied theater in undergrad and like you were more kind of arts focused. Did you ever have pushback from your family and friends about studying that? And did you ever like have to worry about what you would do when you graduated?
Yes. Yes, I did receive a lot of pushback from my father, not my mother, my father. For him, I believe, with all of the things that he went through. I mean, my father was born during the Great Depression in the Deep South, you know, so I think like he thought that a job, like a career as being a doctor or a lawyer, you know, like those are not, like being an actress was like ridiculous to him. And not because he didn't believe in me or my talents, but because he felt like it was too hard and I wouldn't be able to make a living and I wouldn't be able to take care of myself. And I think that, you know, my brother's also an artist. He went to art school. We all went to art school. So my poor father is thinking, but he also recognizes that everything that he did to make the life for us was so that we could choose what we want to do. And you know, and I think I'm just one generation away from that. So I understood why, and I understood it even more when I graduated college and I worked at Borders Books and Music, which was a bookstore, and I had to work at a coffee shop, and I was a tutor in schools. Like, I had to have like 3 jobs, and I was in like one play that was in a weird little strange theater. And like, yeah, I mean, I picked up a minor in college because I realized, I was like, maybe this acting thing, what if this like doesn't work out? So I did. I minored in Spanish, and I always say I have one small regret because I live a life with no regrets. But I wished I double majored in college because I was like, man, if I had that Spanish degree, I could like be a Spanish teacher if I wanted to, you know? But yeah, they weren't into it. And then I didn't go into theater. I mean, I act once in a while in like community productions. And I like doing that. I like performing, but as far as having it be my career, no offense to actors, because I think film's really important and all that, and arts and all of those things, but my life path changed dramatically when I joined AmeriCorps, because I was an AmeriCorps volunteer after college, and I worked in a middle school. And again, that was another place where I saw so many like deep systemic problems that I was like, I think I need to focus on this. I was like, Hollywood does not need me. You know, I was like, Hollywood doesn't need me. These babies need me. And so that's what that changed the whole like direction of my life. However, it was very useful. Having a degree in theater makes me a person that is not afraid of public speaking. It makes me a person that can organize a program and get kids to like tap into their deep dreams and let them know it's possible and that you can study that. And it is valuable. I mean, it's a liberal arts education. Like, some of the things that I know now, my husband's like a genius, like he's for real. He's like a rocket scientist, all this stuff. And some of the things he just simply does not know about Anton Chekhov, that I know. But it's important because in social revolution, the artists play this huge role. So I think it all worked out how it was kind of supposed to work out. But yeah, they were not into it. And I don't discourage people from studying art and getting degrees in it and so on and so forth, because a degree ultimately is a degree. And the way our system works is when you have that degree, it doesn't really matter. Like I have a BA, it's in theater, but I have a Bachelor of Arts, right? So like, I think that that's the only thing. If someone were to ask me that, I would say if you want to be an artist and you want to go to college for art, like go to a liberal arts college. And that way you can like be a well-rounded person in addition to being an artist. And you may find that you have other, interests. I never thought I would minor in Spanish, but I did. And I love that. I have my Spanish, I think my Spanish is my second language that I learned. And that college education really helped maintain it for me. So I would say that the job you're going to have probably doesn't even exist right now. So things are changing very quickly, technology wise. But I think that the one field that we will see growth in is the arts, because we create, think of the jobs that are replaced by robots and factories and all of those things, right? Farming, like what it is. So technology will be taking over so many things like that. However, what they can't, a computer cannot create, it can, but we don't want it really. You know what I mean? Like we want our human art at this time until we become cyborgs. But I think that I feel like art is the soul, and it's of humanity. Like when you look at the things that we create to like make our marks or leave our legacies or to inspire, it's what kind of separates us, I guess, from other animals in the kingdom. I don't know who else does art in the animal world that's not related to like attracting a mate or something, yeah, I would tell the children, you know what, follow your dreams, figure out a way to make it work, and then also to realize that there's many paths, and there's many jobs that you maybe hadn't even considered that will allow you to continue to do your art and create while making a living. I recently interviewed a guy who is an animator, and he's worked on Black Panther, like Captain America, just all these things. So he's a filmmaker, and he's like pursuing his dreams and also making a very good living, because that's a skilled job that's in high demand. So I would say learn. I really encourage the youth to learn the digital arts piece, because that is going to be really important going forward. I also feel like follow your dreams, man. And if you think you're not going to make a living from it, you're not going to make a living from it. And I feel like that's proof, because I didn't think I would make a living off of acting, not really, once I realized like what it was. And even this documentary filmmaking stuff, I haven't sold my film yet. I think I will sell it. But yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of paths, and it's okay to change your mind. Like, don't think you have to like stay rooted in one thing. You can change your mind.
How important do you feel like having those type of connections are for people?
Connection is the key. Networking. Social capital is probably one of the most important things that you can build. So I don't have a lot of money. I wish I did. You got any money, girl? Send me some. So but that networking piece, because that was the other thing that I really realized. And it's not just about like who it's also like having real authentic relationships with people. And even though like right now, you know, I'm kind of going through some stuff because of the pandemic and my mental health is suffering, you know, like I still, if I call any one of those women, they will answer the phone and talk to me. Even if I say crazy stuff on Facebook, even if I do whatever, like there's still people that care about their fellow man. And so I think like really knowing people is important, and like knowing their hearts. And so that's a challenging one for me. Like I think because, you know, there's a lot of talk around in politics around like the establishment, you know, and I think that I just have a bigger understanding because of those connections, because I sometimes hang out with like what has been dubbed the Black Miss Leadership class. Like I, you know, like I run around with people sometimes that in those groups. I talk to them, they're friends of mine, you know, and it's because like in their heart, like I know they want the same thing overall that I want, which is Black Power, baby. But we all got to work our own ways. And I think when you build those connections, you start to understand how things like intersect and who knows who and how stuff gets done. And it's part of it is like cronyism, and part of it is, you know, kind of like this like nepotism, this familial thing. But part of it is also like knowing what has value and who has value in your community. And when you know that, like, you know that that person's a resource, you know? Yeah.
What advice would you give to young people about rejection, and like how do you try to work to handle it?
I would say take what you can learn from it when you and try to figure out a way to use it. Because the other thing is, you know, people will say no to you again and again, and I feel like that's what's happening with my film right now. People were like, no, you can't do a local film about Denver. No one cares about Denver. You can't do a story. Why is it women of color? Why isn't it all women? Why are you doing that? No, you know. So it's like sometimes the rejection. I also want people to like look deeply into the rejection. Is it rooted in white supremacy? Is it rooted in people having this mythological idea that you can't tell a story? So I think that that is the to really like interrogate that, and then and to take like criticisms and feedback, you know, of what can improve this work. And sometimes you have to, like for me, I wouldn't bend on some things. Like I'll take people's, you know, uh advice or thoughts on some of my stuff, but at the same time, like some things also sometimes you just gotta roll with it. And don't worry, for every, like, think there's so many, oh, you're okay. There's so many stories of people who make it late in life, you know, and I'm one of those stories, I think, or I, fingers crossed, or I will be, I think, you know. It's like like Ava DuVernay. Ava DuVernay is one of my heroes, right? She's this independent filmmaker. She made this incredible documentary that like totally, you know, changed people's hearts and minds in a pretty impactful way. She didn't pick up a camera until she was like 32, 35 years old or something. She's like self-taught. She's, you know, and so she's such an inspiration to me because I feel like she has a passionate, she wants to tell these like social justice stories. Jordan Peele, right? Like you get in where you fit in, you make all these jokes and stuff. Jordan Peele is like so impactful on like the genre of horror and like black horror and what that can look like. And that's my mixed brother. So like there's so much out there.
Yeah, the final question that I want to ask you is, what impact do you want to have on this world?
What impact? I want to make sure that my child, and if he has children, that they don't have to fight these same battles around the same. I just don't want him to have to fight for the same things, because I feel like I'm still fighting the battle of like my ancestors to be seen as people, you know, and I don't want him to have to do that. I want him to do something else. Yeah. So all comes down to me, girl. I'm a narcissist. I only care about my own family. But that is really it. Like that's what I hope for, you know? Ugh.